Are you ready for our Lego Bible story? I hope you have your Legos all ready. I have our Lego-sized Jesus with me today because he's actually in this story. Today's story comes from the Gospel of Matthew, and the Gospels are the first 4 books of the New Testament, and they tell the stories of what Jesus did when he was here on earth. And in this story, Jesus said, "The kingdom of heaven is like a landowner who goes out to hire workers for his vineyard." And he goes out early in the morning, and he hires some of the workers and agrees to pay them a daily wage. And then he goes back at 9 and hires more workers. And then again at noon and hires some more. And then at 3 and hires some more. And then he goes back at 5. And there are still people standing around, and he asks them why. And they say, "Because nobody hired us." So he hires them as well and sends them to the vineyard to work. Now at the end of the day, he called the manager and said, "Call the laborers and give them their daily pay, beginning with the last and then going to the first." So when those hired at about 5 o'clock came, they got a full day's wage. When it came to the people who were hired first, they thought that they would get more, but they also got a day's wage. And when they received it, they grumbled against the landowner, saying, "The last people worked for only an hour, and you made them equal to us, who have borne the burden of the day, of the heat and the work." But he replied to them, "Friend, I'm doing you no wrong. Did you not agree with me for the usual daily wage? Take what belongs to you and go. I choose to give this last the same as I gave to you. Am I not allowed to do what I want with what I have? Or are you just envious because I am generous? So the last will be first, and the first will be last." When Jesus talks about the kingdom of heaven, I think it is often confusing. If we say that each of these blocks, or the height of them, is worth a daily wage, we would normally think that the person who worked the longest for the same job would make the most. That would seem fair. At least it seems fair to me. And when the people who worked the longest were grumbling, I don't know about you, but that kind of seemed fair that they would be upset because they worked longer. But a funny thing happens when Jesus talks about the kingdom. The kingdom of heaven doesn't seem to follow the same rules that we do. The kingdom of heaven isn't about only getting this much or that much because of what seems fair. The kingdom of heaven is about generosity. And it's about the last being first. This is what we think should happen, or I sometimes think, that the person who worked the longest gets the most. But Jesus says the last will be first, and the first will be last. That's different from how things usually are. They all wind up with the same amount. So that in the kingdom of heaven, everyone gets the same amount. It's not about how long or how hard they worked. It's about the generosity, in this story, of the landowner. So in the kingdom of heaven, it would be about the generosity of God, who says the last will be first and the first will be last. Now I've knocked Jesus over too. it can be hard to hear some of the things Jesus is saying, because we sometimes want things to go the way we think is fair. But Jesus isn't about fair. Jesus is about generous. It's a different way of being, I think. And I don't know about you, but when I hear these stories, I don't know why, I always assume I'm the first person, the person who worked hard and long. I never think that maybe I'm the last person, the person who didn't work for nearly as much time, but still got the whole wage. Do you think it's different if we think about ourselves as the last person? The person who didn't get hired, who maybe people didn't want. But Jesus says they should have just as much. If you were this person, would the kingdom of heaven sound like a really good idea? This is what Jesus did. He came and he said that so many of the ways that we think aren't the way the kingdom of heaven is. That those who are last will be first. I wonder what that means when you think about it. I wonder where you would be in the laborers. I wonder if sometimes you'd be here, sometimes here, and sometimes here. But you get the fullness of the kingdom, all of it, no matter where you are. I wonder what you think about that. I wonder where you are in the story. I wonder what you think the kingdom of heaven will be like.